8 o'clock a.m., 10/14/2012. It's on a Sunday. And what do we have before us, MMTs and our worldwide traders? We have Intuitive Surgical, the one who makes the robotic Da Vinci's that do surgeries in the operating room. And one thing about it, it's been one of the great performers. And we're about to go into a weekly sell signal, but they're going to report the earnings after the close on Tuesday. And we take a look at the growth environment for this company. And one of the things that we take a look at moving forward, depending on who wins the election, Obama or Mr. Romney, there'll be a trade in here after the earnings and something to do with the election as well. We won't talk about that part. We'll talk about that a different day. What we are going to take a look at is that Intuitive Surgical had a closing print of 494.58. Tomorrow morning, the stock market's going to open up. Technically, when you go into any kind of earnings season, is that this name is going to trade a certain way between now and Tuesday. And it's falling through as far as the moving averages on the weekly. They're falling through the 10-week, the 40-week. They're below the 20-week. That's called bearish. And they're pointing down. And not only that, back over here, you had 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks. You had about 8 weeks below that 10-week moving average that's going down in value, declining. Now, having said that, MMT, we come back with that volatility trade right down here. And this is, now, I'm going to draw this trend line for you, because this way we'll be ready, and we know where this weekly part right here is. It's part of this very same bar. Here is the half bar where we made the all-time calendar highs, coming right off of that weekly half bar down here. That's for, right here in this range. Right up above here is 481. This is where that weekly support level was, and that's also part of that breakout. But it's also part of this lower trend line here on the weekly level as far as your standard technical analysis deviation goes. Earnings season is high price volatility. This thing misses the quarter, we're going to look and see how it would drop all the way back down here. And that's going to be 452. 454 area, or at the bottom even down here at 448. This is where the trend started back in that period of time, which was on 122 of 2012. And ISRG took off to the all-time highs, and then during the last quarterly earnings, they didn't fare that well, and you can see what happened right here. You can see these 3 weekly sell signals, and that was part of the last quarterly earnings. Now, having said all of that, is what is the CapEx spending in the hospital arena? Who buys these big machines from? Who? Intuitive Surgical. Well, what I am going to show my MMTs, I've showed what we're going to be looking at. This is a 448, 454. If we get a bad earnings and they guide down, you can see a quick $50 drop. The way that this trades in after hours earnings on the initial headline, right after the close, they like to spike it, and then after they spike it real quick on the headline, then it sells down. We have done this trade a number of times in after hours on the equity itself. Now we're going to go over here and we're going to talk about a $520 call. Now, why are we going to look for a $520 call? I'll tell you why. Right up here is that wall of resistance at 520, and this is where that weekly half bar is. That's going to be the resistance level. This is where that trend goes up and it hits it. Now, what we're looking at in the call side here is that 520 call, it's not totally inflated up here like it was before Intuitive Surgical had come down in value. It's deflated areas. It can get a lot more deflated because it's going to be the morning after that the options can really get tossed around based on the directional price movement of those earnings. Now, on the flip side, we are going to take a look at this. It is and this is a monthly contract. Both are monthly, and it reports Tuesday, so they expire Friday. But look at the 450 put. It too is not totally deflated when you look at it, because that meant that this price was down around $3, and so it's about $2.50 up. But once again, we're going to be taking a look at that going into the earnings based on the closing print before the reports come out. And do we get entries tomorrow? Is if this thing sells down, these puts got a long ways that can go back up, and it's a 450 put. So Chipotle Mexican Grill on this weekly chart right here drops down to these support levels. That means that the 450 put right here would go skyrocketing up in value. Now that's what that looks like. Now on the call side, when we have that wall of resistances up here at 520 area, the 520 call up and out of the money is what we're looking at, because that's going to be the wall of resistances. Now, if it gives a good report and guides up the quarter, the stock likes to make about a $50 run, which if that was the case, then we could come up above these levels and start working over here on a good earnings report. That's 529. And what is that? That's going to be this weekly support level right here where we broke down. Still all in the same weekly bar that back on 7/15 when we had the last quarterly earnings, we were short this thing and had puts. This thing got torched. And we have not broke it, and it's a strong trend, kind of like Chipotle Mexican Grill. However, we believe that this coming quarter is not going to be rosy for them, and they're going to have to mark down into a slower growth environment. Yes, they do execute well. Yes, they do. No one's saying that they don't. But from a fundamental perspective, there is potentially a big downside move. So we will look at how to trade this put option before the report comes out. That's the 450 put at that support level. Then on the flip side, we will look at this $520 call, all our monthly expiration on a good report, that you gap up here, you get above that trend line, but it wouldn't matter. You gap up there, the value of the call is going to go up, and we would sell them right away on the opening bell. So Tuesday after the close, this is the earnings preview. We'll be talking about it tomorrow. We'll be talking about how this name trades starting on Monday morning. And we'll use the call and the put strategies, and I have lots of them in here. We're going to be looking at several different calls and put strategies on this earnings report. A lot of times, we get the best prices after they report the earnings, because the following morning, they just steal money out of both sides of the market. They steal money out of the call side. They steal money out of the put side. And that's where, in a lot of times, we can get the best deals. However, we will see how this trades between Monday and Tuesday going into the close, because if we break higher going into the earnings, that means that that put option that I showed you, so if they trade up going into the earnings, that means that these could come all the way down and get real cheap. And there would be nothing better than owning these at about $1.50. That this would break up, test this trend line up here going into the earnings, or get above the 10-week and the 40-week. It's a bear reversal trend. It's not a bull trend right now. But earnings outside of this chart and what it says, earnings are going to be the king, and that's where the volatility is going to be. Now, once again, ISRG. Once again, MMT, it is upon us with the election and major catalysts in earnings with a slower growth environment. The bellwethers, like ISRG on this weekly chart, can go down on a bad report, and we're going to be involved. I'm going to conclude the preview. This is what we would look at down here on a bad report, and then of course we would get long immediately. And or they walk it up in anticipation. We'll know tomorrow and Tuesday. Concluding Chipotle Mexican Grill, concluding the 520 call up and out of the money for good news. For bad news, based on the weekly chart, is that we're working with the 450 put on ISRG below the market. How do we get the entry? That will be decided on Monday and Tuesday.